Shall we officially get started? We're back.
Yes, we're back. We're back. And this is season 4 of Two Girls Who Scare Easily. And I'm Andy.
And I'm Katie.
And I'm excited. If you're just joining us for the first time, we talk about true crime and paranormal and weird history and cool stuff that happens in and around Colorado because it's a weird state. We got lots to talk about.
It's a very weird state.
Like, I feel like the more I research, the more stories I find.
Mm-hmm.
It's wild.
Oh, I don't like what I just did with my mouth there. I apologize. Yeah, I found 2 additional research ideas working on this one. I was like,
yeah,
that sounds amazing. Stop it. Go back. And it started, I had a very different idea of what this episode was going to be. I kind of thought it would be like not an amalgam, but like a greatest hits sort of weird things. And no, it's the one.
fair.
But it's strange and it's tragic. I don't know. So today, what I have for you is the Great Pueblo Flood of 1921.
Yay! I had, full disclosure, I had started to research this way back in season 1, and then you recorded a flood episode, and I was like, I can't do that now. And then I kind of just forgot about it. So, yay!
So we're bringing it back. I'm really not going to bury the lead here. It was the worst flood in the history of Pueblo, one of the worst floods in the history of the state. And it happened in a 2 to 3 day period between June 3rd and June 5th, 1921. And when I say bad, I mean bad. It functionally destroyed the town.
Oh, man.
The pictures, holy shit. The flood caused more than $25 million in damage.
Wait, is that then money or now money?
I believe that's then money.
So much money. I mean, it has to be.
Disaster.
Yeah.
The entire downtown area was completely reshaped. We're talking like railroad lines and trolley car lines where hospitals were put, businesses, neighborhoods. There's this whole widespread riverwalk area now that was created because of this flood. And
oh, man.
How much is it in today's dollars? I should have done that. Why didn't I do that?
I don't know. Should we look it up? Let's look it up.
Sure. Why not?
What'd you say? 24 million?
25 million.
Oh, no, that's not what I want. Let's see. $406 million. Almost 407.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Just bananas. The entire town looks the way it does now because of this. It lost business revenue. It lost agricultural industries.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention countless lives. But an exact total is harder than you might think. So we're going to put a pin in that.
Okay.
And like it shaped the state response to floods because of things that occurred during this time period. And it was like, it wasn't just Pueblo. The whole region was absolutely devastated by this flooding. But Pueblo was the major city at the time, and it just untold destruction. So let's start with a brief history. If you, like myself, didn't actually know much about Pueblo.
I don't know a lot about Pueblo. I mean,
I've driven through there.
I've heard some interesting rumors, but
I've heard some very interesting rumors. Some rumors that were so interesting that I have now saved them for additional episodes.
Excellent.
So let's do a brief history. If you're listening to this and maybe you don't live in Colorado, or maybe you just moved here and you're thinking, where the fuck is this place? It is situated in the southeastern part of the state. It is at the confluence of the Arkansas River and Fountain Creek, about 112 miles south of Denver. So it's on your way, well, it's past Colorado Springs, and so it is south. And geographically, it is just outside of the mountain range, which is important when you think about flooding. It's not very far outside of the mountain range, but it's at the base.
Mm-hmm.
So think gravity and water rushing. It is also in part of the state, this was a fun term, that is referred to as a banana belt.
What is a banana belt?
It's not a belt made of bananas. I'm sorry. But it is. It's simply that's a referential term, like a meteorological term, to any segment of a geographic area that enjoys warmer weather than the region as a whole. So like a pocket of warmer and in general more mild than the rest of the area.
Color me intrigued.
I know. And now we know.
Now we know.
Pueblo is also was/is somewhat, but not as much anymore, was one of the largest steel producing cities in the United States.
I think I did know that.
It did get a nickname, Steel City, because the industry down there was absolutely massive.
Mm-hmm.
And there is still the historic Arkansas River Project Riverwalk that is in the Union Avenue Historic Commercial District. It's also called, the Historic Arkansas River Project is also called HARP. So I saw that acronym referred to a lot.
Okay.
And they have been primarily responsible for maintaining the floodwaters and the history in that area of the Riverwalk.
Okay.
So it's kind of cool.
Like a river walk does sound charming, but knowing that it's the site of like a historically large flood is a little unnerving.
It's very charming. I stopped in Pueblo a couple times for lunch when I was like on road trips.
Mm-hmm.
It's wonderfully charming. It's just also there because everything that was there was wiped out. Not like a little bit wiped out, like off the map. Gone.
It does always kind of amaze me that like something like that will happen. Like your entire town is literally just washed away. And we're like, you know what? Let's build here again. We'll be fine.
You can't keep us down. So the town of Pueblo is actually a series of 4 towns that were incorporated at various stages. There was a historic trading post called El Pueblo that was built in the region around 1842. It was partially abandoned after a massacre in 1854 on Christmas Day, but I'm not going to discuss that right now. That's
I've
a
heard
different thing.
heard whispers of that one. Yeah.
And I studied it when I was getting my degree. So it was really fun. So we're going to put a pin in that, and I'm not going to discuss it. It's a whole separate thing. But the trading post disappears, and then the current town is Pueblo, which was founded in 1870-ish. It was incorporated into the town, I should say.
Okay.
South Pueblo, which was absorbed in 1873, Central Pueblo, which was absorbed in 1882, and Bessemer, which was absorbed in 1886.
Okay.
So the official date of the consolidated city of Pueblo, which is its official title, was between March 9th and April 6th, 1886.
Okay.
It's confusing. because records and dates that are actually on paper versus when the town just kind of grew into itself, are
Mhm.
not always the same. It's like the 1800s of it all. This is when people were still just kind of writing when a child was born in a Bible and going, that's good enough. That's a birth certificate.
Right.
You could just write a date and say that's it, even if it wasn't true.
It was summer sometime.
And then you say, well, sir, there's a 5-year age difference. Yeah, it's somewhere around there. I mean, maybe they were 1, maybe they were 5. The world may never know.
Nope.
So after the city was consolidated, it was a pretty major economic and social center, especially of southeastern Colorado. Um, I mean, there were other smaller agrarian towns around, but Pueblo was the main metropolitan area.
Mhm.
And it was kind of being hit like it was an up and coming city in the 1870s and the 1880s, the latter part of the 19th century. It was sort of hailed as the wild west, taming and like humanizing itself and bringing social order to a chaotic area. The Chicago
Mhm.
Tribune boasted how Pueblo's lawless reputation was giving way to orderly agriculture with
Hmm.
triumphalistic rhetoric.
Fancy. I feel like at that same time, Denver was kind of going the opposite direction.
Yeah, they were getting a little squirrely.
Yeah.
One of the most prominent families was in the town was a family who owned like a rifle making and revolver company. And one author said of Pueblo, talking about the town itself, the necessity exists no longer for sharps, rifles, and revolvers. These have been supplanted by the plow and the mowing machine.
Wow.
So they
I'm
were
sure.
pretty fucking proud.
Yeah.
I mean, they should have been.
Mhm.
I mean, there were state legislatures or legislators and former governors who were building homes in this area and having farms. Like, there was some society. And then steel emerged pretty early, especially in the 20th century when it was becoming a massive industry in large swaths of both the West and of the Midwest.
Mhm.
Um, 1909, the city was considered the only steel town west of the Mississippi River.
All right.
Big deal. Up to 1921, here's a fun little tagline: Pueblo was considered the saddle making capital of the world.
Okay.
I don't know if they gave themselves that title
It
or if somebody
seems.
else did.
Hmm. Yeah, it seems like an old timey, like marketing pitch.
Did you just write it on a postcard?
Uh-huh.
I
They like
mean,
started putting it in the newspaper or something.
yeah.
Yeah.
I just imagine someone in a leather chair that was definitely red for some reason, taking like a long draw of one of those massive cigars, just smoking inside because you can,
Yeah.
and then saying, here's what we're going to do. We're going to call it the saddle making capital of the world.
Mhm. Because his
Big
wife just
kid.
married a man who made saddles.
Mm hmm. Yep, 100%.
His
That's,
sister just married a man, not his wife.
I was like, did she leave him and then he was bitter? But if you're helping the dude's industry,
No,
that doesn't
no,
make
his
any sense.
sister is where it's.
Yeah, and the new brother-in-law is sitting in the room as well. They are now both smoking
Mm-hmm.
cigars and drinking brandy and saying, what we're going to
Yep.
do is we're going to call it the saddle-making capital of the world. I know your business isn't open yet, but it's already big. It's going to be huge, kid.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So all of that to say, Pueblo was doing the damn thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to set the stage of like, this was not some sort of podunk town. This was a major urban city. And I think it's fair to say that had it not been for 3 pretty intense days in 1921, all historians, especially Colorado historians, kind of agree that Pueblo's rise and the way it became a powerhouse in the lower part of the state would have been very different.
Hmm.
And it
That would have
really
been really
starts,
interesting.
it would have been very interesting because there was still, at this point, there was still mostly friendly competition between Pueblo and Denver of who was the bigger draw, who was the industry puller. Denver was the capital. Denver had silver and it had gold money, but Pueblo was getting agriculture, steel, saddles,
Mm-hmm.
ranching, and all of that was starting to kind of get pulled to this wide expanse of a southern area. And it kind of comes to a little bit of a halt because, as with most things do, it starts with the fact that there's not a lot of rain.
There's not. There's not. We are technically a desert, I believe.
We are a arid slash semi-arid
Mm-hmm.
region, and that's where the problem arises, is that May of 1921 did not have a lot of rain, particularly in the mountains that are right above, we'll call it, above the city of Pueblo. And in particular, the 2 rivers that the city is on.
Mm-hmm.
So, like all rivers on the Colorado Front Range, the Arkansas River was prone to mostly severe seasonal flooding
Mm-hmm.
from melting snow, from spring rains. Anyone who lives here, especially who lives on the Front Range, knows that's when somewhere is going to flood.
Mm-hmm.
And about every year to 10 years to 5 years to, maybe 3 years, somewhere along the Front Range is going to get a pretty massive deluge. It
Mm-hmm.
just happens from snowmelt, from spring rains, from how dry all of the ground is down here and how quickly it can absorb the water or not.
Mm-hmm.
That's the risk. It was also not uncommon for Pueblo to flood. It had already done so in 1864, 1881, 1893, and 1894.
I mean, that seems like enough floods. It's probably not going to happen again. It got it all out of its system.
Yeah, we're fine.
That's
It's
how
not
that
even that
works.
big of a deal. Because the consolidated city of Pueblo is just east of where the Arkansas River already is moving pretty quick coming out of the mountains. And then Pueblo is right where it dissipates.
Mm-hmm.
It is a floodplain, which is great for many things, like irrigation, like access to water for cattle and horses, access to water for a city. The point is, they knew that it had some pretty major floods, and they did have precautions in place. There was a
Okay.
levee system. There were levees on the Arkansas River, more into the foothills of the mountains. There was a levee on Fountain Creek, and levees are just little dams.
Mm-hmm.
Like they had infrastructure to corral these like water systems and tributaries, which up to
Right.
this point basically kept it mostly at bay. The flooding, what?
Pueblo flooding.
The Pueblo flooding, the flooding. All of that to say, up till 1921, that had worked for minimizing the amount of damage caused when flooding did occur.
Okay. That's fair.
Until, as with most things, it is not enough. As we have seen with all natural disasters, especially in our lifetime and in Colorado specifically, sometimes shit goes sideways and what you have in place is no longer good enough. Which was the case starting on June 2nd, 1921. That was when basically a storm front became very consolidated and just chilled out in the foothills above the mountain, or right above Pueblo. So
Mm.
in Dry Creek, which is west and more into the foothills.
Okay.
And then it expanded. So essentially what happened was a massive rainstorm moved down here and then just fucking stayed
Yeah, that's weird. They don't usually
for
do that.
3 days, which does not usually happen. That's also kind of the same meteorological phenomenon. I can't say that word too many times, but I got in one successfully, that happened with the flood in 2013 that affected Lyons and Johnstown and Boulder County
And Thornton,
and Thornton.
because I was there. It took out roads.
And yeah, and I mean, washed out 66
Mhm.
and cut off Estes Park. So think of that. We just days of intense rain
Mhm.
in the mountains when there has been a period of not a lot of rain. So the ground is not able to absorb all of this that fast.
Mhm.
Pueblo alone received about 2 inches of rain on June 2nd, and then another 1.6 June 3rd, for a total of 3.58 inches of rain. That doesn't sound like a lot. For context, that was more rain in 2 days than the entire state had received in the month before.
That is wild.
So that's nothing,
Uh,
but it was a fast nothing. And the problem was the rivers were already still pretty swollen because it's early enough in the summer that you're still
mhm.
getting snow melt from the super, super, super up high.
Yeah, it's like really just starts in like May, June.
Mm-hmm.
Like the snow in the mountains starts actually melting.
Yeah, which most people don't think of or realize when they come to Colorado.
Unless you're a skier, and then they love it because the ski resorts can stay open until like April.
Is it A Basin will stay open until like July if they can?
I don't even know.
They
Probably.
always are like, we'll do it later. Later and
Right?
later.
There's still snow. Come on down.
It's slush and maybe it's a little mud. Don't worry about it. Come in here.
It's fine.
So, furthermore, which always makes me feel smart when I say that. Furthermore,
Furthermore.
all of this rain was falling in a very concentrated area of the Arkansas River.
Okay.
This is not, so it's not, again, because it's really condensed, the river isn't able to adjust or dissipate the water in like an even way so that there isn't as much flooding. It's just all of it right now.
Mm-hmm.
And a study that was done post flood by the United States Geological Survey noted that that was one of the main factors in how severe all of this was. Think of just a massive flash flood.
Mm-hmm. I assumed like to do that much damage, it'd have to be pretty fast.
Yeah, it's huge. It comes in, it goes out. The water recedes relatively quickly, but water is a fucking powerful thing. The maximum discharge for the Arkansas River the year before, in June of 1920, was less than 5,000 cubic feet per second. But in 1921, at this same time, it was over 100,000 cubic feet per second.
Oh dang.
Mm-hmm. But it was, so June 2nd, a lot of rain. You're getting some flooding in the foothills and in the mountains. It hasn't hit Pueblo yet.
Okay.
So that's not what did it. It's the rain that continued on June 3rd.
Ah.
And it was because the rain just didn't stop and was really heavy and fast again. That is what caused the Arkansas River to flood its banks, break the levee that was holding it and containing the water flow. And it sent all of this water downstream to start flooding Pueblo.
Right, because like the levee was holding back even more. So
Mm-hmm.
as soon as it breaks, like, oh dang.
Yeah. So in other towns and other regions around the downtown area that
Mm-hmm.
the Riverwalk is now, there had already been some water rise, so people were kind of aware that this was happening
Mm-hmm.
and were beginning to move
Right.
and try and get to higher ground. But there were still a lot of people that absolutely refused. They thought that the water was going to dissipate, they thought that the rain was going to break.
Mm-hmm.
And this is 1921. There is no advanced warning system.
Mm-mm.
Like, it's all basically word of mouth and certain neighborhoods.
Right.
And if your neighbor is like, no, it'll be fine. We've had this in all of these prior years and it always calms down. It'll be okay.
Yeah. I mean, especially if you just moved to town, like of course you're gonna listen to your neighbor who's been here for 10 years or whatever, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. They'll say, oh, we always have floods around this time of year. It's nothing big.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a big deal. They're, anxious about nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So that was another key piece, is that people knew that there was flooding in the area, but they didn't think it was going to be that bad. And I was going to read a quote. Yes. So one of the USGS report authors, a man named Willis Parker, stated people refused to leave, feeling themselves safe because the levees along the river and the river's usual spring rise had caused no damage in the recent past.
Mm-hmm.
And then June 4th rolls around. The rain is still happening. The water in the area, in all of the creeks and because there was a creek downtown. I mean,
Yeah.
the river cut through central Pueblo.
Mm-hmm.
So that was still rising, but again, fine, not a big deal. But they could see the water table moving higher and higher. And then unfortunately, at midnight on June 4th, the flooding peaked and it was a wall of water that was rushing and rising at more than 24 and a half feet because
That's the
all
worst
of
time.
the the
Ah,
worst time.
like at least if people were like awake, they could maybe run away.
Mm-hmm.
They're not even awake.
The loss of lives we will get into later is massive for so many reasons, and that is one of them. Everyone's asleep.
Yeah.
Like,
I hate it. I hate it. And I'm just like imagining because floods aren't quiet either when it's a flash flood like that and like just waking up in the like seconds before. What an awful
yeah,
way.
yeah. You just wake up and there's this roar and
Uh-huh.
nasty floodwater in your bed.
Right? Ugh.
And it's dark because it's the 1920s. So, like,
And it's
streetlights, barely.
and it's cold
Barely.
coming because it's coming from the snow belt.
This is so fun. I'm so happy that I'm
Mm-hmm.
making you this uncomfortable. So, one of the survivors was interviewed later and described the devastation. Her name was Cora Rockefeller. And she was interviewed by the Western Star on June 9th, 1921.
Okay.
So, just a few days after.
Mm-hmm.
She said, read the worst and you can believe it. I shall not try to describe it except to say the stricken district is utter dissolution. The newspaper writers with their facts cannot give you half the picture. No one can say with certainty whether 500 or 5,000 lost their lives. It probably never will be known. Bodies are being brought in every day from miles down the river. The rush of water was so terrific that hundreds must have just washed downstream and will never be found.
Oh, jeez. That's
Like,
crazy.
yeah, so she was like, as bad as you think it was worse. So without weather forecasts or sirens to warn anybody that this 24.5 foot wall of floodwater was coming towards them in the middle of the night, devastation was massive. There were 2 passenger trains with
Oh,
an
no.
estimated 200 people on board that were on the rail coming into Pueblo, and they were caught in the flood when this happened.
And then you just have a train coming towards you.
And then train. It's not like floods are
Oh.
destructive because water takes the path of least resistance and
Mhm.
it doesn't get out of your way, you get out of its way. But also, it's not just water, which is like a horrifying thing. What is that phobia you feel like cold and want to
Mhm.
throw up when you think about large things that are submerged? Whatever that is,
Mm.
I have it. Like,
Mm.
I just did this to myself. I researched this
Yeah.
up. I
Yeah.
did
You
this.
did. We are nothing if not masochistic.
2025.
The world's on fire. Let's look
Woo!
up old-timey disasters.
Mm-hmm. Hey, remember this thing that's already happened? Did we learn from that? No?
No,
Cool.
that's not what we do here.
Dope. My dog is in the background though, and she is very
I know.
cute with her little pompous grass tail.
No, floof.
She makes everything better. Anyways, I digress. In addition to the 200 people on board these passenger trains that have now just been yeeted downstream, there was a lot of, let me backtrack. There was a lumber yard that caught on fire because, so downtown Pueblo had electrical lines and telephone lines for telegraph and for trolley services. There was a downtown trolley that
Okay.
ran, and it was attached to wires. Additionally, one of the things in city planning, because again, they thought that the levees were going to take care of everything, is that the city utilities building was downtown by the river. It was up high and somewhat away, not far enough. So there were electrical lines that were like, built. They were
Mhm.
connecting the town. And now this massive flood of water comes in, absolutely destroys your utilities building, and knocks over all of these power lines. And it knocked over power lines that were close enough to this lumber yard, which was also in the floodplain, that it just caught all of the lumber on fire.
Cool.
So there are
Cool, cool,
trains
cool.
barreling towards you. There is water barreling towards you. There are floating rafts of burning lumber that are just being barreled down the river in downtown Pueblo in the middle of the night.
Oh.
Yeah, eyewitness accounts are like you're hearing all of these horrible things and you are just seeing whole trees on fire.
Was there also like a rabid badger farm that we could just throw in?
Why not? Why not? Let's just make it worse. Sure. And they are taking out, in their wake, they are taking out all wooden structures. They're taking out brick structures. There are pictures of the train depot before and after where there's one wall that was definitely an internal wall and a roof. And everything else around it is just a hole.
Oh my gosh.
Like it was Legos. It's insane. So the flooding comes through, decimates everything, but then the water recedes pretty fast. Because remember, it's just like cascading out of the mountains, and then it gets into this floodplain area and is able to disseminate and be absorbed
Right.
by the rest of the ground. So the water recedes pretty quickly.
Okay.
The flooding is actually over on January 5th.
Okay. So it started. Wait, when did it start? At midnight on January 5th?
The rain
Or sorry, June 5th?
rains started on the 2nd and 3rd of June.
Mm-hmm.
The massive wall of rushing water is in the evening of June 4th,
Okay.
midnight on June
Yeah.
4th. And then by June 5th, the water has receded
Okay.
ish, enough that some rescue efforts can start to be made. And the rain had stopped.
Okay.
So there was that too. That was when everybody saw exactly how much destruction there was. Buildings were collapsed, whole neighborhoods, like houses were lifted off of their foundations and they were just
Mm-hmm.
gone.
Ugh.
People included. Train cars and trolley cars had been picked up by the water, turned sideways, and just become plows
Right.
that crashed through brick buildings, that crashed through everything. The lumber yard was still on fire. Power
Mm.
lines were down. There was no power. There was no electrical light in the center of town because the utilities building that had the generators providing the power had been flooded. There was a hospital that was
Oh
flooded.
no.
So it had no power and had been damaged by the flood because it was also close enough to this area that it got destroyed.
Yeah.
They had built up all of this infrastructure in this downtown area, and then a negative of that is when it's all gone, you're super fucked. Debris everywhere. If the buildings weren't destroyed by the flood, they were destroyed by the fire that continued to burn from the lumber yard. So
Mm-hmm.
other wooden structures, especially that maybe were on the outskirts or something, now you can catch on fire. Because why not?
Cool. Cool, cool. Yeah. They didn't want to be left out of the
No.
destruction.
Why
Yeah.
not? Us too. Um, and there was mud. Tons and tons and tons of mud. Feet of mud everywhere. So that's hard to move. Horses
Yeah.
can't pull carts. You can't drive in that. A 1921, a Model T Ford that's not going to cut it in
Mm-mm.
this.
Mm-mm.
Like, there are no roads
Yeah.
to provide access points for emergency vehicles or services or even people trying to rescue you. You
Mm-hmm.
can't get anywhere. So that's just continuously exacerbating the problem.
Yeah.
All told, the flood had inundated 300 square miles of downtown, of Pueblo. I'm not even going to say downtown anymore. Of Pueblo.
Yeah, that's like not even. That's crazy.
And all the
So much
surrounding
space.
regions, they got flooded too. Because all of the rivers in this area are rising. Like, it's not just
Right.
this one. It was
Yeah.
concentrated there, but it wasn't the only space. So everywhere's just wet and gross and
Ugh.
muddy.
I can like feel that like ache of when like your feet are constantly wet inside shoes. Ugh,
Don't you
it's the actual
dare.
worst. It's the
That's how you
actual
get
worst.
trench foot.
Mm-hmm.
I was at a music festival one time and it rained super hard. Like, it was the summer, so they got afternoon thunderstorms and it got so muddy and it just and it's just heavy to lift your feet out.
Yeah.
This might be an unpopular Coloradan opinion, but I'm not very good at music festivals.
That's fair.
Are you?
No.
Okay.
I haven't even gone to many because like I just don't want to be anywhere for that long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the Renaissance Festival is not the same thing. That's
No,
fun.
different thing. And you're moving around. You're not just like in a crowd of people in like the blaring sun.
Hmm.
It's a different vibe. I don't know.
I need to go somewhere where I can like turn it off.
Exactly.
And at festivals
It's
you just
too
can't get
it's
away.
yeah. The overstimulation factor is very real.
And then everywhere's hot. And
Hmm.
everywhere's muddy
Or dusty, and like you're
or
sweaty, so
dusty.
it's sticking to you, and then it becomes mud. Yeah.
Sweat mud. Ew.
Hmm.
But I'm sure there's a lot of Coloradans who are like, well, I'm turning you off
There.
now. I love that you love it, and I support that for you.
And you know what? We will leave more space for you there because we'll
That's
be
great.
here, not
Yeah,
there.
I will not be taking up your shaded camping areas. Oh,
Hmm.
someone got struck by lightning at that festival too?
Oh, damn.
Like, badly?
Did they survive, or was it like a cool
I
story
mean,
for
I
later?
I don't know. The storm came through and there was a lot of thunder and lightning, and then there was an ambulance and you could hear people like in the trees being like, "Hey, they're over here. They need help."
Jeez.
Yeah, cuz they were by a tree and
Yeah.
bing. So all of that to say, mud is not your friend, and it's
Mm-mm.
definitely not your friend in a situation like this where you're trying to get injured people out and get supplies in.
Mm-hmm.
So 300 square miles. It's estimated that over 500 houses were carried away. It's hard for them to know exactly how many numbers because records are
Yeah.
spotty with how many houses are in a neighborhood and all of that kind of stuff. But they know that it was
Mm-hmm.
at least 500 houses in this area and probably more.
That is
90,
wild.
like the building
Yeah.
gone. Gone.
That would
Leveled.
be so surreal.
Industrial buildings, poof. 61 stores, 46 locomotives. Not the railroad car. I'm talking the engine part. 46
That's so
locomotives
many.
gone because the rail yard was
Oh,
by the river. They put everything by the river.
it's pretty, guys, but like,
They were seeing it as this is a really good access point. And you're right. It is a very good access point. That's not the issue. The issue was they only had one way to mitigate flooding, and it was the
mm-hmm.
levees. And when they broke, there were no other ways to mitigate flooding. Bridges were taken out, roads were washed out,
I
power
mean,
lines were washed out.
it would never occur to me that, like, even if I'm by a river, it would never occur to me that we could get a flood so bad it could move a locomotive, let alone, how many did you say?
46.
46.
Do you want to know how many railroad cars?
Hit me. 104.
Higher.
Oh no. 153.
Higher.
207.
Higher.
My God. Okay, just tell me.
1,274 railroad cars.
Oh my God, I would have been guessing forever. That is so many.
That's
I'm just picturing like going downriver and just finding this like modern art exhibit of piled up railroad
Mhm.
cars. Like,
Yeah, and that's the water pushed all of this stuff sometimes hundreds of miles downstream because it's going to go until it loses enough energy,
right.
cubic feet of water
Yeah.
to dissipate and stop moving them. And you don't know what that's going to be.
Yeah.
Nobody knows. So, and because all of the telephone lines were down, Pueblo couldn't even relay to the state capital, Denver, and say what happened.
Yeah.
So people had to physically go to Denver and relay the information like that in order to let the state know that they needed help, like they needed
Yeah.
aid, and they needed it very quickly because the
Right.
town was screwed and it was on its own. So yeah, in 2019, and you just did the inflation. So it was
Mhm.
$25 million of damage in 1921 money. And then in
Mhm.
2019, that was estimated to be 358 million. And
Yeah,
now it's in the
and
400s.
almost 407, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what happens after.
Okay.
Um, the town was immediately placed under martial law because humans are going to human. And for
Mhm.
as much as there are accounts of people helping each other survive, there were immediate accounts of people being dog shit and using this as an opportunity to loot, to
Mhm.
rob people, it was, they were just coming out of being lawless.
Yeah.
They were basically feral.
Ugh.
And then this happens, you go right back to it.
Mhm.
So, immediate martial law, about 1,500 local men were deputized to increase the police force, not just for crime, but also to just help with rescue efforts.
Mhm.
The Colorado Rangers and other military units were brought in to ensure the town's security, particularly around the businesses that carried higher values like lumber and
Mhm.
trains and steel and
Mhm.
banks, because bank vaults were still holding cash and
Yeah.
they are literally open right now.
Right. There's just holes. They're missing
There's
walls.
they're
Yeah.
missing walls.
Side note, do we still have Colorado Rangers?
I believe so.
Like, the only state I ever think of as having Rangers is Texas, because Chuck Norris.
Because Chuck,
Because
that's your
Chuck Norris.
basis?
That's my basis. Yeah.
Is Chuck Norris? I'm
My
gonna look
parents
that
were
up.
obsessed with that show.
Like, are these the same guys? I guess there are still Colorado Mounted Rangers,
Mm,
but that's weird. There's Colorado Mounted Rangers. They're a non-profit.
weird.
Hmm.
I don't think that's the same thing.
Okay.
I
Former
mean, I guess.
statutory state law enforcement and auxiliary unit of the U.S. state of Colorado. But they were the guys who did like the ski patrols in the Alps during World War II, like the
Okay.
ski soldiers.
I guess when you put it in, like, the context of Army Rangers, it makes more sense to me. But
But these were different,
yeah, I don't know.
different ones. When I read that, I equated them to like a National Guard type force.
Yeah,
They're pulled in on a volunteer basis because you are desperate for help.
that makes sense.
And I mean, the city was at this point, they needed everything. Um, the orders from the municipal government and the state government were looters are to be shot on sight. So now we have the natural destruction that just occurred. We have families who are split apart, no power, and we now have the added human element, which is really fun.
Mhm.
There was also this morbid wave of tourism.
No, that checks out, though. Now that you say
Yeah.
it, I'm like, okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Like, we do be like that.
Yeah, and it had to be, like, real boring back then.
There's no fucking TV.
No.
Not even radio right now. I mean, there was radio, it existed, but your power's out. Yeah, folks from Colorado Springs and Denver came down by like the hundreds. Some of them came down early and were genuinely trying to help.
Mhm.
But then there's so many of them now. Like with the clothes donations that just happened with the LA fires, like you get so much of it so fast. really nothing can be done.
It becomes
All
its
of
own problem.
it, yeah, now that becomes its own problem, and it did. So people either genuinely or disingenuinely wanted to come down and help, and then when they couldn't, they just stayed
Oh,
and wanted to, like, well, if I can't help, then can I look around and see how bad it was?
hey, but I also imagine that there's like not really enough food for the people who are stuck there.
No, there isn't. They
So
don't
the
have
extra
food.
people are maybe not great, not
Yeah, like,
helping.
no, Brad, you can't just poke around.
Yes, let me give you a tour of my life's biggest tragedy.
Yeah, I
Keep an
just
eye
last
out for my sister, because I don't know.
because she's probably dead. Brad, get fucked. Um, so the city very quickly could not handle all of these people rubbernecking and gawking. So the city banned visitors who did not have proper authorization. So if you were not part of something like the Red Cross or the Rangers or like
Mm-hmm.
a governmental emergency service, you were not allowed in the town. And if you
Yeah.
were in the town, you were not allowed to leave.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
You'd think they
One
would
of
want
the,
to like get some of the people out.
well, they needed to try and account for who of the citizens was missing.
Okay, that makes sense.
And that was thorny.
Mm-hmm.
Thornier than you might think. The weird, well, it's not weird. So the town of Pueblo, all of the drinking water has been tainted at this
Mm-hmm.
point. So they're under a what is
A
it
boil
called?
order.
A boil order. Um, and also temporarily, the state government lifted the prohibition ban because this is 1921. This is prohibition.
I mean, okay, good for them though. Way to read the room.
Yeah. So the state temporarily allowed Pueblo access to alcohol. And starting June 9th, 1921, Pueblo was lifted, or the prohibition was lifted in Pueblo for 30 days. And that was not supposed to be for drinking. Wink,
No.
wink, wink. 50 gallons of whiskey were shipped to Pueblo for the purposes of sanitation
Right.
because the hospital and, emergency tents and camps were like, well, we need to sanitize,
Yeah.
surgical tools and medical equipment and all of these other things. And we can't, like, boiling water is really hard and we
Yeah.
can't do that fast enough. So it was the original purpose was to function as like hand sanitizer because there's also just poop. Just
Oh yeah, because like any kind of I don't know what their sewage system was like back then, but even if you just had outhouses, like those flooded.
yeah,
Yeah.
poop, poop.
And like poop from the farms.
Yeah.
It's like cows and pigs poop a
Mm-hmm.
lot.
And it's everywhere now. So obviously, it did not simply stay for medicinal purposes. Now you have that additional layer that everyone is devastated and drunk. Woohoo!
God, that town had to smell so bad. Everything is damp and full of poop and on
and
fire.
muddy and on fire and
And
whiskey.
like people aren't like bathing because there's just
Oh
no
no.
water. Like
There's no water for that. You're not doing that. And this is not like delicious barrel-aged whiskey. This is rot gut.
step above moonshine.
Yeah, like fresh as the day they were born. It's fermented, send it. This is not good.
Got a little aging on the road.
In the 5 hours that it took to get down there. So all of that is happening. And then one of the biggest issues that the city was facing really was how many people were unaccounted for. Because
Mm-hmm.
it was the middle of the night. People were in their
Yeah.
beds, and there was no way. They were trying to centralize recovery efforts, but there was really no way to figure out
Like,
who
the
was.
houses are gone. You can't just go door to door
Yeah,
and be like, "Hey, who's here?"
yeah. If all of your neighbors are gone and you don't know if the family had left because maybe they
Yeah.
read the signs and evacuated, or if they didn't, they no idea. So there to this day are extremely dissimilar death tolls,
Mhm.
and no one is able to agree on it for various reasons. There's a historian, Jonathan Cohen, in his 2020 master's thesis where he focused on the Pueblo flood. He notes that the death toll was a range from just under 100 at its lowest to as high as 1,500.
Mhm.
So part of what he did in his thesis was to try and put together a master spreadsheet of all of these sources from various points in time, because the numbers would change also depending on how recent or how far back the
Right.
newspaper article came out. Um, so maybe between 600 and 900 people
Okay.
lost their lives, but it could have also been as high as 5,000. One of the
Yeah.
big reasons is that this was a major agrarian area, and as such, and steel and ranching, it pulled in a lot of migrant workers. And that was a
Mhm.
big, big factor. Like, there were a lot of racial implications.
Because there were all these migrant workers that nobody was tracking.
Yes, that no one was tracking. Did not. I mean, the companies that are hiring these folks are either just not paying them and saying that they will, or barely paying them, and they're not keeping records. Not to
No.
mention there is just like flagrant racism and nobody
Yeah.
is missing these individuals. They're not, their
Mhm.
employers are not caring, and their families are not anywhere near the region, so they're not close enough to look for them.
Exactly. Well, and there was just so much movement. Like, it'd be
Mhm.
hard to keep track of even if you were trying to.
Yeah. So even if your whole family is coming with you for jobs, which was very common, especially in the 20s, like agricultural migrant workers are going to go wherever they can. And even if your whole family's with you and you're sleeping in a tent, if you just got wiped out, no one will know,
Mm-mm.
which is
Especially if you
devastating.
got buried in mud. Like,
Yeah.
they can't even tell that anybody was there.
Yeah. There's no, there was very often, and it was described, there's no trace of the migrant camp. They're just gone. So a lot of the official death tolls were only focused on like Pueblo citizens,
Right.
and they were not the only ones impacted.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
and even among the citizens, like, what if your in-laws came to visit you or whatever? Like, that wouldn't
mhm.
be necessarily recorded.
Yeah, they're not going to be on like census
Mm.
records or home or like building permits or anything like that. There were a lot of reasons why most of the death toll was just simply not accounted for.
Mhm.
And the bodies, they couldn't even use the bodies that were getting brought to them as a toll. They were setting up makeshift cemeteries and makeshift morgues, while
Mhm.
their actual morgues were completely offline because they were full of poop mud and water. And even that wasn't a very good indicator. That's one of the ways that they were trying to get death tolls. But anywhere you went, you were going to get a different number because of all of these factors.
Right.
And hundreds of bodies were found miles downstream, up
Yeah.
to years, decades later. Like, there are accounts, especially in like the more remote places around Pueblo and this region of Colorado. There are accounts in like the 40s and 50s of people finding skeletons on the edge of a creek or of a riverbed.
Yeah.
And who knows where that person was from.
Right? That's wild.
Like, and it's the middle of the night, so you're not like fully dressed tumbling down with identifiers. They
Mhm.
also, even if they did find your body, they had a really hard time figuring out who you were
Right.
because you're in pajamas and in water moving that fast, your clothes are going to get ripped off. It's what a lot of people
Mhm.
don't think about. Like,
You're gonna get smacked with stuff that
yeah.
might, and then you're sitting in water, so you're bloated.
There was just
Yeah.
it. It's just awful, and I don't want people to. I don't make light of how horrifying it would have been to experience all of it
Mhm.
because people lost everything.
Right.
Everything. And so I usually err on the higher side of the death toll. It was
I think I
probably
would
closer to
as well.
even up to 5,000 people that lost their
Yeah.
lives. Rebuilding started immediately after the emergency efforts, and the levees were being rebuilt, and infrastructure and flood mitigation started occurring like in 1921 and 1923. But it really took through 1961 for the infrastructure of downtown Pueblo to come back. There were whole businesses that lost everything, and if the people survived, they just left.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
And think about it. This is 1921. You're trying to get back on your feet, which takes years. And then a
Yeah.
decade later, we are in the middle of a Great Depression where there is not a lot of money
Mhm.
going around, especially for businesses. Like there are federal public works programs and stuff,
Yeah.
but and then there's World War II. So it's one of those like, it takes such a long time for the city to build itself back up.
Mhm.
It does. It does it because they're
Yeah.
some
They're
resilient
there.
fuckers. It also cost an estimated $50 million of
Jeez.
1961 money. And that was basically just to rebuild the downtown Riverwalk area that is there today.
Yeah.
Rebuild and reinforce the levee system.
Mhm.
And then in 1965, it happened again.
Okay, at that point, if I had stuck it out, I'd be like, "You know what? I'm out."
This, I found a fun newspaper article from the Pueblo Chieftain, and they called it Pueblo's less famous flood. They led with that. They're like, look, you probably don't know about this one, but here's what it was. So briefly, here's what happened. Once again, it is mid-June.
Shocker.
Shocker.
It's almost like we get storms every June.
It's almost like that's exactly what happens
That's like the only time that we get rain is in June.
is June. And I'm pretty sure last year, at least in the Boulder area, the whole month was rainy. Whole month.
We literally got afternoon thunderstorms like every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it lasted a little longer in the summer last year too. But
It did. It was a very wet summer, which meant a lot of mosquitoes, and I was pissed.
mm,
So, once again, you're getting warm weather fronts that are mixing with pockets of cold that are still over the mountains, and you get massive storm fronts. Now, this storm front was a little bit different. According to the National Center for Atmospheric Research and its Weather and Climate Impact Assessment Science Program, they could track rains began to fall on the eastern foothills of Colorado around June 13th.
okay.
And then between June 13th and 16th, there were frontal systems all along the Front Range. So think
Mm,
of it like just pockets of the same storm front
mm-hmm.
stretching the whole mountain range of the state. But
Yeah.
this time, it's bigger and it's not quite as concentrated.
So it's literally like the sequel.
It's the sequel. This time, it's personal.
It's bigger, but, like, somehow less focused. They didn't quite
Smaller.
have the idea fully fleshed out.
Yeah, we brought back the recurring characters, but then the one who was dead, surprise, he's not dead.
Yeah.
I hate when they do that at the end, and you're like, you motherfucker.
Right.
I mean, I understand they were a big, they were a big star. They were a big star name, so like you're gonna make your money. But I don't like when that happens, unless it's
Mm-mm.
Jaws. Always bring back the shark. Always. So all of that to say, instead of the one, it wasn't just this area that was receiving a lot of heavy rain at this time. It was kind of everywhere.
Mhm.
So in Pueblo, particularly on June 14th, the rains were a lot heavier and they were getting some hail damage and stuff like that. June 15th, the rains are still pretty intense.
Mhm.
And then a little farther north, June 16th is when they start moving south and really start
Ugh.
dumping on Pueblo. The Arkansas River Basin, the flooding occurred again, but it was in a more widespread area. So it was Fountain Creek north of Pueblo, but
Mhm.
this time the major damage was centered just a little south in
Okay.
the Purgatoire River and its tributaries around Alfalfa, Colorado. And then the Arkansas River also flooded from Pueblo to Great Bend, Kansas.
Oh,
So
damn.
it crossed the state line. I mean, the Arkansas River crosses the state line.
Yeah, but that's like half the state.
Yeah, everywhere was getting rain. We were just
That's wild.
all getting dumped on. And I'm pretty sure the last flash flood that I covered, which was in the
Mhm.
mountains, was in July. And again,
Oh,
occurred in
yeah.
like the middle of the night. So, super fun.
That's why I live on top of a hill.
Smart move.
Mhm.
One of the editors of the Pueblo Chieftain, in an article much later, Steve Henson was living in Pueblo at the time. He was 11 during this
Oh,
flood. And so he wrote in the article that it was mid-June. It was about 11 p.m. He had just celebrated his 11th birthday, and so his mom was driving him home from a party. And she drove over the East 8th Bridge to pick up his grandfather, who worked the
Mhm.
night shift at an industrial laundry under the northwest side of the bridge, around what used to be Centennial High School's practice football field. His grandfather was 64 and he didn't drive. So normally he walked, but this time
Mhm.
the rains had been super heavy and the river was rising. And so his mom was like, I'll come pick you up after your
Right.
shift. Um, and she also knew that flooding was happening on Fountain Creek. And his mom heard news reports and knew what that meant, that it was probably
Right.
going to hit the river downtown as well. Um, he credits his mom listening to the news program with saving his grandfather's life, because a few hours after that, if she hadn't picked him up, he wouldn't have been able to cross the bridge.
Oh, wow.
Their homes were safe. They were on a hill. They were on the
Yeah.
elevated side of the street, but they
Mhm.
looked nervous. They could see how much the water was rising up.
Yeah.
It didn't produce nearly as much damage to the downtown parts of the city, but there were still substantial losses. It's just in perspective. So
Right.
a lot of farm areas and crops were
Mhm.
ruined because the tainted water came in and poisoned the system. There was still damage to transportation and urban facilities, and that was
Mhm.
estimated to be about $15 million.
Ugh.
A lot,
Yeah.
a lot, but compared, not as
Right?
much. And also,
Yeah.
thankfully, when it came to the hard, the things that the city absolutely needed to function, like utilities and a generator and the
Mhm.
hospital and, police station and various other, we need to keep society functioning, those had been moved to higher elevations and out of the immediate floodplain
They
post
learned.
1921. So they did learn. Like, there's a
They
huge
learned at
state
least a little.
hospital, a little bit. There were huge state hospitals and tuberculosis sanitariums, as a matter of fact, that
Mm-hmm.
moved. They stayed in Pueblo, but Pueblo was like a huge and widespread city. So they shifted from the downtown river area to higher, like up on hills. The state hospital that's a whole separate thing. We're not
Okay.
even discussing the Pueblo State Hospital.
Right?
But don't worry. Yes, we will. If you thought we're done with Pueblo, Colorado, you would be wrong. And anyways, so that's a separate thing.
Mm.
So the flooding was much more severe, again, a little bit farther south, but it reinforced that having simply a levee system and a more intentionally designed river walk that could also serve as like a secondary get the water out of town as fast as possible still wasn't
Mm-hmm.
enough. I mean,
Right.
civil engineers can design areas around floodplains to act as drainage, and
Right.
that's helpful, but they still primarily relied on the levees further up in the foothills and in the mountains to control the flow of water in
Yeah.
populated areas. And this was once again a reminder that that was just not working.
Mm-hmm.
So after this, actually 5 years later, from 1970 to 1975, construction began and was completed for the Pueblo Dam.
Okay.
And that was the final piece. It's a very large, so they created a dam and then they created the man-made lake. And that
Mm-hmm.
is ultimately what really served as runoff to finally
Right.
get a handle on the kind of severe flooding that could occur.
Uh-huh.
It was an effort that was part of the Frying Pan Arkansas project, and that's just a fun name.
The Freinsa, Arkansas project in the Banana Belt.
In the Banana Belt. So it created the man-made Lake Pueblo to allow for
Mm-hmm.
storage and then controlled release of the
Yeah.
Arkansas River. So they dammed it and then said, no, you have to go here. We're going to make this
Yeah.
reservoir. And now the dam can control how much water comes out. And they'll release more
Yeah.
when it's at a higher level.
I think that's actually how Chatfield Reservoir came about too.
I mean, that's how most of
They
them.
built it as like, yeah, a
Yeah.
flood control thing, and then they're like, oh, also we can store drinking water here.
Mm-hmm. And, recreational, and like you
Yeah.
can use it for fun and camping. I mean, it's man made reservoirs really are like a multi purpose
Yeah.
tool. And I am very aware that from an ecology perspective, it can also do a lot of unforeseen or like secondary damage that I think, in
Yeah.
the heyday of creating them between the 30s and the even 60s and 70s, were
Mm-hmm.
not really, they were not doing long term studies on how a man made
No.
lake would affect like fish populations and migratory patterns and waterfowl,
Yeah.
roosting and nesting grounds and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand that the solution to everything is not always let's just dam it up,
Yeah.
but that was the solution at this time.
Mm-hmm.
So flooding is still possible, as you and I both experienced in the 2013 floods. And I mean, Colorado has flooded umpteen times
Oh yeah.
in between these. It would still require a lot of water to bust this particular dam. So this infrastructure is now able to withstand up to 5 times as much water as what happened in 1921.
Okay. So they should be good.
They should be good.
If
Understanding, climate change
yeah,
is
and infrastructure upkeep
an
issues.
infrastructure maintenance and upkeep, which I don't think anybody would be shocked to learn has not really been done in many places. There are lots of, smaller, but very important dams and reservoirs that are in desperate need of infrastructure repair.
Mhm.
And I mean, climate change is a thing. We are seeing stronger and
Yeah.
stronger storm fronts and more extreme weather patterns.
Mhm.
So, it sounded crazy 1965. There's absolutely no way 5 times that water. We can't actually say that now. Nobody thought the Marshall Fire was going to happen either, and it did.
Yeah. I
So,
mean, we're getting tornadoes in the foothills, which is
yeah.
fucking wild.
Could you imagine trying to tell somebody that in 1921? No,
Right? Like, no, that's
no.
not.
They go, "What do you mean, a dust storm?" Oh, no,
Tornadoes are Kansas problems.
they were. They still are. They still are Kansas problems. So,
Yeah,
all of
they're
that
even
to
bigger
say,
Kansas problems now.
yeah, they're Kansas Problems, the sequel. It's our problem now. Because Eastern Colorado, geographically, folks, is just Kansas.
Yeah, it's just West Kansas.
That's Eastern Colorado is West Kansas. Everyone knows this.
Hmm.
All of that to say, invest in municipal services because they make life better for everyone.
And when they tell you to get out, just get out.
Get out. Get
Just get,
out.
like, worst case scenario, you spend a couple of nights away from home and then you come back. Hopefully to your home still standing.
In a perfect
But
world.
you also survive.
But you survive.
Yeah.
And just be kind to the planet. Come on, guys. We got one.
Right.
So, anyways, a lot of the businesses were rebuilt and did come back in 1921. Parkview Hospital, which was the massive state hospital, it did return, but again, it moved to a location north of downtown so that it could stay open and remain operational.
Good idea.
But a lot of businesses, and they really don't know how many, just simply never came back.
Yeah.
And the city's population plummeted even after this, not just because of the death toll, because a lot of people lost everything and they left.
Yeah. Or they're like, hey, that's on a floodplain. I don't want to live there anymore.
Yeah. And the city's population was markedly decreased even after World War II. Like, even into 1965. And a lot of anthropologists and archaeologists who have done some digs there, because it's been long enough, it's been over 100 years, there are archaeological remains of the flood.
Mm-hmm.
And um is it not no epidemiologists study viruses in large populations, but public health, anyone who studies what happens to large groups of people and
Yeah.
populations, you can see that the city was on a rise and then boom, and then a
Right.
really slow, markedly much slower than what was predicted up to this point,
Yeah.
development and population growth. And they know that it was because of the flood.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
That's
that's
wild.
that's the Great Floods
Floods.
of Pueblo, Colorado.
Man.
Like,
Yeah.
I
I
just there's some really good documentaries. Rocky Mountain PBS made a great one
I watched
in
that
in
one.
2021, and it's really cool. They show great pictures, and it's Rocky Mountain PBS. Everything they do is
Right? Love them.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Um I do have some clippings of newspaper articles. The city of Pueblo has some pretty good resources. They have a lot of
I bet.
very cool archives in their library. I mean, this is integral to its development and its legacy, and they have done a good job of protecting it. So it's even along the Riverwalk, there are plaques. It's
That's
very
what I've
apparent.
heard.
It's very apparent what happened. And it's
Hmm.
not a thing that they're shying away from.
That's good.
I mean, they can't.
That's good.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy.
yeah.
That is, though, like, so growing up, my parents' house was on a hill, but it was a steep enough hill that we had like a walkout basement.
Mhm.
and then it kept going down to the neighbors behind us.
Okay.
And like we watched their house get flooded so many times. I
Oh.
was like, okay, I'm gonna live up the hill.
Yeah.
I'm just not gonna mess with that.
Yeah, you learn pretty quick that water
Yeah.
and gravity, they're
Yeah,
best friends, and they can really be your worst enemy.
they really can. That is a clique that will not let you in.
No, you were not part of the cool kids clique.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm. Um, we will definitely revisit Pueblo. There are a lot of other, like, both unsettling and also deeply fascinating things that
Right?
occur in this city. We didn't even get to talk about, like, the spooky paranormal side of this, but that's because I'm saving things. Don't worry. Don't worry,
Okay.
folks.
All right.
We'll be back.
I didn't even think about the ghosts.
The
It
ghosts.
has to be so haunted.
The
The whole town.
ghosts. And yes, it is. Yeah, it is.
All right, add it to our vacation list.
Yeah, it's, think it's sort of it's not undiscovered because obviously people live there and it's still there's a University of Colorado campus there.
Yeah.
But I still feel like, especially in the Denver metro area, because there was that kind of rivalry. I mean, the state
Yeah.
fair is in Pueblo.
It's early. Okay.
And there's still kind of that rivalry. It's like when you're in the Denver metro area, you don't really venture out.
Yeah.
You just don't really think that these other huge municipal towns exist. And Pueblo's kind of a hidden gem in that regard.
Yeah.
And it's just, our state's fucking wild.
It is. It is. It's wild.
It's so wild that it really only leaves us with a few things to say.
Stay smart
Stay safe.
and stay spooky.
And and where can they find us, Andy?
Oh, you can find us on Instagram. Instagram for sure. I don't know what other social media is in a weird place right now. Instagram for sure. At Two Girls Who Scare Easily with the number 2. You can email us directly at Two Girls Who Scare Easily with the number 2 at gmail.com. Okay. Bye.
Bye.